In this video, I've got 5 years of remote closing experience distilled into one video for you guys after generating just short of $1 million in profit of closing deals, setting deals, and then closing those deals myself, managing a sales team over those 5 years, and then also getting in the ballpark of 50 to 100 closers and setters placed in positions, making anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 a month. And the first thing I want to say, like, if you're in the process of trying to find a job, and you don't know, like, if this is going to work for you or how it's going to, pan out, I will say, like, it might not be working for you right now, but it does work, because I've just been in this industry long enough where I know, like, I'm not someone that started with any sort of sales ability whatsoever. I actually think I have like mild autism because my ability to communicate with other human beings is pretty bad, and I got to the place I am now, and several of my other friends, even my girlfriend, got a job as an appointment setter, and you know it's working, for so many people who you think that it wouldn't work for. And so inside this video, it's probably going to be a little different because I'm just, not going to have a lot of editing inside. It's going to be more authentic, raw, just me giving you, I put together a Google Doc here giving you 5 lessons that I've learned over those 5 years. And so without further ado, let's just kind of pop right into it. So the first lesson I have here is that companies don't like to gamble on new hires. So this is kind of just on the exact point that I was just talking about here, is that if you're brand new and you're struggling to find a position, this is really why. It's because companies don't want to take a chance. They'd rather hire someone who already knows what they're doing. And that's just because the amount of time and effort that goes into training a new rep is a lot, but also, like, they're going to be giving you leads that they've either spent thousands of dollars generating, or even if they're high quality leads coming through in their organic channels like YouTube or Instagram, and you're calling them up and not knowing what to say, they don't want to mess with that, right? And so what they really want is they want proof. That means they want testimonials, they want past sales experience, they want to know that you've at least put the work in on your own to even just at least understand the industry that you're going to be working in, right? I've seen a lot of reps on interviews that don't come from kind of our sort of niche, our circle of like people who we've trained, and they'll come on interviews from a completely different like sales background or even no sales background, and they're on these calls and they're not using the right jargon or information, and you can just tell like everything in here is completely like new to them. And so that's where a lot of reps fall short of, is they just jump right into the interview portion to try to find a job without learning any of the foundations and the principles of what this industry is all about, which you're going to learn more about inside this video so that you can utilize that in your next interview here. So what you want to do is you want to get experience any freaking way possible. So that could mean offering free work, finding commission only roles, or practicing sales calls daily, right? And the way that you practice, and I've said this on the channel many times before, is just role playing. If you can enter a community, for $47, $20 a month, something like that, and you just join it, and everyone in there is practicing, and you just do, role play once a day, you spend an hour doing that, by the time you start interviewing, and maybe you've done 20 or 30 of those, you can now leverage that experience and say, hey, I have 30 hours of experience in a high ticket scenario, talking to clients and converting them into products in a mock scenario, right? You kind of gloss over that mock part, but that in itself is experience that you can leverage, right? And so the second point here I have is like building a portfolio. So this is everything that, if you don't have like direct experience in a job, I mean, you got to think about like the top closers in this industry that are crushing like $30,000 in a single month, just hopping on Zoom, having conversations with people. They had to start somewhere, right? Like everyone is starting with zero experience, and no one goes through some kind of, sales university for 4 years where they get a certificate and then they hand that to a business owner and say like, look, I've gone through this college, right? That doesn't happen because there's no like official college, right? But what you can do is build a portfolio of everything that you have done to learn about this space. So watching my YouTube channel and going through any kind of online courses, even though that's not an official course, it still shows that you have dedication and like learning towards this space. practicing the role plays, like I said. You just want to show that you're absolutely obsessed with improvement in this space. Okay. The more that you can position yourself as a low risk hire, the better. And so what I found a lot of my guys have done to get hired in a really kind of interesting way where they don't have any experience, they basically say on the interview that I might be the only one here without experience, but you damn well know for sure that I'm going to do whatever it takes to figure it out. I already have a foundation of training, learning, understanding. I've read these books, I've gone through these courses, and my first 2 weeks on the job, if I don't know something, I'm going to put my hands up and say that, but I'm going to do everything in my power to figure that out. And to me, that comes across as someone who's just going to hit the ground running, and it's not going to be as high as a risk to someone who's hopping on that offer and just saying like, yeah, I don't really have any experience, but I really just want to make a lot of money, and your guys' company looks like it can give me that money. The business owner's not going to really take that seriously, right? And so what these companies are looking for, or what they aren't looking for, rather, is they're not looking for raw potential, like your potential in conversational fluency and like you just naturally understanding sales principles. That's a bonus, right? But what they're looking for is like closers who will make them money immediately, right? And so you have to convince them that is you, right? And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later. But at the end of the day, guys, skill set is fine. Skill set is great. But at the end of the day, sales really is a numbers game. Someone who is going to be dialing and hitting the phone, calling leads for 8 hours a day versus someone doing 4 hours a day, 3 hours a day who wants to work a little more lax. Usually that person is always just going to outperform that person because they have more numbers on the board. It's really just as simple as that, right? So if you can convince them that you're going to be putting numbers on the board and just really working your hardest, like in my opinion, that's how you get these companies to hire you, which again wasn't my impression when I first got into this space. I really thought like you needed lots of experience and could demonstrate that you've already made a certain amount of money to get hired. And I just found that that is not the case. Okay. Thing number 2 here is that finding clients or finding companies that'll actually hire you to pay this money, to pay you money, that's a part of this whole game in this industry, right? It's, long gone are the days of corporate security where you're going to find a company and work at that company for 40 or 50 years until you have a retirement plan. In this industry, even the best companies with the best offers might only sell that for 5 years or something like that. And so you need to always have a radar on what are the companies or what are the offers that are doing really well in this space, and where can I potentially grow into and where can I go, right? And that's just the nature of the beast in this industry. So when people are looking to find jobs, usually they're looking in the wrong places. And they assume that these opportunities will just appear. They don't take proactive action. They reactively sit there and wait for someone to come to them and present them an opportunity. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes if you've been in this space and you're connected with a lot of people, you do get referrals onto other offers. But if you're just getting started and you're new to the space, you want to try to build up the quickest sort of roster of potential clientele as possible, right? And so in my experience, again, in the past 5 years of seeing this, the best roles are never publicly posted. And I'll get onto that in a second on why that is. But typically these companies are hiring from an internal referral basis, private groups, and personal networks. And again, we're going to go into like what those actual networks are so that you can get inside of them, because there's a decent vetting process that goes into getting into one of those groups. But basically, you just have to proactively hunt for jobs, right? And that just means messaging business owners directly, networking, and joining some of these industries, right? If you're only applying to job boards like LinkedIn or like public Facebook groups, I'd say, in my opinion, you're behind, because as the job gets posted on these places like Indeed, there's already 200 plus people that have applied, right? And it makes it very hard to stand out, although I have tons of strategies and ways that you can stand out. It's just they have to vet through all these people and it becomes tough. So Some of the places that I found, again, over the last couple of years that have just kind of risen to the top of applying and finding jobs. Number one is RepSelect. Okay, so you can find in this website 5 a day companies that are hiring closers and setters, and they're vetted by RepSelect, which is awesome. You know, they don't let any company just join and post. I believe they have them go through a certain set of criteria before they can post, and it's a very, very efficient way to finding jobs. And even and when I talk about as well, you know, finding clients as part of the game, even if you're not looking to necessarily work at that company, I'd say it's still a bonus to reach out, introduce yourself, and connect with a few people inside that company. You know, you want to be friends with a lot of people in this industry because it's a somewhat small industry in a niche. If you want to get even more efficient in finding a job, this is something that I only discovered very recently, since being in this industry. Well, recently, I guess if I've been in here for 5 years, I guess last 2 years or something that I found it, but pipelines, right? And so what pipelines are massive sales companies have portfolios of clients, like coaching clients, that these coaching clients are doing like $1 million a month, right? So you can imagine like sales company A, right, has on their roster of who they manage like Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi and Grant Cardone, right? So all of these companies, they work with this sales company and just trust that this sales company is going to give them good reps and that those reps are trained. So what you can do is, and this is the most efficient way that I found you can get jobs, is you just apply directly to that pipeline. Tell them a little bit about yourself. You'll go through some very rigorous testing so that they're vetting you to make sure you're trained up and you're good. But let's say it takes you maybe an hour, 2 hours to go through a few interviews, a few applications to apply for one pipeline. Well, once you're approved and you're in that pipeline, in the future, whenever there is a job or a company that is looking for a job, you just get sent that job post and now you can apply for that company. And there's way less competition there, and they're much more likely to bring you on because you've already been vetted. You know, they trust you now. And so that's a huge one. If you're looking for pipelines and stuff like that, you can go into RepSelect and they have a whole pipeline section of all the most vetted pipelines. Facebook groups, you know, is good because you can search for terms like remote closing, high ticket sales, and join groups when they're hiring. I'm going to get more into that later because Facebook groups has kind of taken a turn over the last year. LinkedIn, right? Cold outreach. And then, like I said, referral networks and stuff like that. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's it more or less, really. Lesson 3 is that getting good in this space isn't as easy as you would think. And so what I mean by that is maybe most closers, most setters just believe that, you know, if they're given like a really good script, that if I memorize that script, I can perform in this position and do well. And, you know, in general, that's actually fairly true, but it's not at the same time. What I mean by that is, you know, you got like sales trainers like Alex Hormozy, and his whole thing is like every single person on that sales team should be saying the exact same thing at the exact same time. And that's how you create consistency in the sales team, and everyone starts closing in the same exact way. If you don't follow that script and you're not making closes, well, that's why. But, you know, here's the thing is that yes, you can follow a script and pretend and basically, you know, get a close here or there. But the real issue is that if a prospect goes off this script, you are stuck. And so I would say in the first maybe 3 months of a position, you can just rely on a script and get good. But you're going to find every now and then you're going to have a prospect go off script and you're not going to know how to handle it. And so the best closers know how to adapt in these situations, and they understand why the prospect is saying what they're saying and why you are saying what you're saying. And so my point here is that you want to focus on the principles of conversations and human psychology rather than just the scripts. So you want to learn about things like pain points, urgency, how to control the call, tonality, what all of this means. And over time, as you learn those things and practice these things every single day, you get much better, right? You can't get like that good just by reading a script, right? You need to like understand these principles. right? Really, at the end of the day, if you just study buyer behavior and understand people, you can really, really drastically change your closing rate. Okay. A script can get you started, but only real skill set, but you only get real skill, but only real skill will get you paid. Yeah. If you can't think on your feet and you're not a closer, you're a robot. And that's like the worst thing about this. It also detracts away from the fun. Because if you're just reading a script, it does feel like robotic and it can suck a lot of your like life force out of you because you're like, man, like this just kind of sucks. Right? I have no like personal identity. And so that's what happens with a lot of closers or setters in the first 3 months of a position. And they're like, why do I feel so drained? And it's because you're not showing up like authentically. And that comes when A, you study the principles of human psychology, and then two, you're able to sell in your own way. And this is very common amongst sales teams where everyone has a different style of selling and how they do it, but everyone follows the same script or wording or flow, right? And so that's how you get really, really good, right? It's not as simple as just reading a script at the end of the day. Lesson number 4 is that scams do exist in this industry. So I get asked all the time, like, is remote sales, remote closing, is it a scam? And that comes from 2 places. Sometimes, number 1, people are looking from the industry on the outside looking in, thinking like, is this whole industry a scam? And number 2, sometimes people get into roles and they don't make any money, and then they claim that it's a scam. And I want to break down like why that happens, okay? Because it does happen, okay? Number 1, the scam on the outside that I've seen more than ever right now is Facebook. Like public forums like Facebook have so many people now that are trying to recruit you and join their Telegram and give you this like great offer. But at the end of the day, the offer is, hey, you have to buy our offer to get placed on an offer. And once you buy, their offer is really just, hey, go back into the Facebook group and sell more people onto our offer. So it's basically like an MLM type scheme. And so that's become a lot more prevalent over the last couple of years as more and more people have recognized that this industry is growing at such a rapid rate, and there's more demand for setters, more demand for closers, more people are getting into the industry, and you know that opportunity is there to scam people. And so that's thing number 1. If you just reference some of the more private groups that I mentioned before and go through more of a rigorous testing process of finding companies, then that really shouldn't happen. But the second thing I wanted to cover is once you get in the position, if you're not making money, why is that? Okay. And the reason is because, like I mentioned before, sales is a numbers game, and not every call will close, not every call will buy, but over time, the right skills and really hitting your numbers is how you win. Okay. This is a concept that many of you might have already like heard, but maybe some of you haven't. But bad leads don't exist, only bad closers. So if a company is generating calls, someone is closing them. If it's not you, it's time to look in the mirror. And this is a truism that happens in sales teams all the time. They're always looking towards the marketing team as a savior for them to get better leads, to close and make more money doing that. And I'll tell you, most of these closers aren't making money because they're not skilled enough to handle those leads, and they're putting all the blame outside, right? So this comes to a lack of preparation, right? You can't expect to close these deals if you haven't mastered things like objection handling, reading people, and creating urgency. Like the difference between one closer and another, putting them in an offer with the same amount of leads, one guy could literally outperform that guy by 4 times as much, and they have the same leads. Again, they have the same leads that they're dealing with, and they're making the same amount of calls, right? So there's a skill set issue here as well. So what you can do is you need to review all of your calls. Like every top closer that I know, they listen to their own calls when they're at the gym, when they're driving their car, when they're walking their dog, and they're always looking for ways to optimize and improve on what they can say and listening back to their tonality. It's pretty stark actually. Like bottom guys, they don't do that. They don't listen to their own stuff ever. And so they're not looking to improve. They're looking to copy and paste a form of doing their job that already just, it doesn't work. So Another thing you want to get to is if you can study objections until you love them, then that's a great place to be in. Because again, and this is just like something that I've noticed over the last 5 years, is that when you get an objection on a call as a closer and the closer smiles and they're getting excited, that's when you know you have a really good closer. Because oftentimes the first 30 minutes of a call when you're doing the discovery phase, it's like you're just on an autopilot, kind of saying the same thing. It's like super, super easy. When you've done it enough times, it's super, super easy. And then they either close or they give you an objection. When they give you the objection, that's what it feels like the real game starts. And you're like, it's time for me to show up and change this person's belief, change this person's perspective. We're going to go back and forth, and we're actually going to try to work towards a solution together. And it gets very exciting, right? If you dread this, you're always going to struggle, right? So you need to learn how to lean into them, right? And this is when guys call this a scam. It's because someone gives them an objection. They're not getting any sales. No one's buying from them. They're like, this whole industry is a fucking scam. Well, it's not, because you're just not doing you're just not doing your job, basically, right? Another recommendation is just get mentorship, man. Find someone who is 5 times better than you at this and pay them to teach you how to do this thing. Yeah, I can't tell you, I probably spent in the ballpark of $80,000 on mentorships over the last 5 years, just downloading other people's systems and ways of how they do things. And that's in multiple cases. That's not just sales. I've done marketing and stuff like that too. But yeah, that's the fastest way to improve, right? If you're struggling, it's probably because your skills aren't where they need to be yet, right? So that's where you really want to reflect. You can get hired with very minimal skill sets if you just adopt the right attitudes, but over time, if you're not making the money you need to be, you have to just look inwardly at your skill set, because again, there's someone out there that is closing, that is getting deals with that same pipeline that you're working with, okay? Lastly, how do you make consistent income? Right? Consistent income in this space is really just math. I have 2 weeks ago, I had a setter come to me who she just got in this industry in August, and I'm recording this now in March, and she was bouncing between two companies for 6 months, and both of those companies were tiny. They were each doing maybe $30,000 a month. So right off the bat, the income potential wasn't there. Like she could not make enough money to even support herself. And she's like, well, my income isn't A, where I need it to be, and B, it just fluctuates. And so when I actually looked at her numbers, I saw that number one, her calling schedule was super inconsistent. So Sundays she would make 80 dials, 100 dials as a setter, and other days she would make 5 or 10, right? And the other second reason for that was because, again, the company was too small to even support giving her more leads, or really just have the volume of leads that were already in her pipeline. So she'd already called some of the leads, and so she couldn't call any more leads. I mean, there's always leads that you can call, but she was just wildly inconsistent. And so what I told her was you haven't made the income you've wanted to make over the last 6 months because you haven't had enough attempts at to bat. It's how many hours are you working on average per day? And those hours were small and inconsistent. So I'm okay, you need to work more hours and you need to make more dials, right? It's as simple as that at the end of the day. If you want consistent income, you need to have a consistent number of dials, or as a closer, you need to have a consistent number of calls on your calendar. Okay, it's as simple as that. Another thing here is if you want to build long-term income, build a pipeline of future deals, right? Follow-up is surprisingly where most of the money is made, right? 80% of sales happen after the 5th follow-up. So if you quit after the first call, I found that every business has found this. It's not just a me thing. It's you're leaving a ton of money on the table here. Business owners love closers who bring their own leads. So if you can find a way to generate your own deals, you become invaluable to the company. And you can do this through every call that you have, every close or appointment that you set, you can follow up with them and ask for a referral, right? Even if they don't buy, who else would you know that would benefit from this? And that's you now creating a new pipeline of leads that didn't exist before, right? Another thing here is if you're not tracking as well as you should be, which basically just means at the end of every day and even at the start of every day, you're not tracking like how many appointments are on your calendar for that day, how many are scheduled for tomorrow, have they been confirmed, what are the deals like, then you're not staying organized. And if you're not organized, you don't really know your numbers. And if you don't know your numbers, you can't make adjustments on how you can make your income more consistent, right? Yeah, I think at the end of the day, if you adopt a business owner mentality, not just an employee, where your job isn't just to close, it's to build relationships that lead to a long-term income, your income just can just go freaking through the moon. Like I'm telling you, if you have leads that you're just working on for like 6 months, 8 months, even a year, you're going to find income in places that you had no idea even existed. And then 1 month you're going to have like biggest month you've ever had. And like 60% of that income came through follow-up deals, right? So at the end of the day, best closers, they don't wait to have leads land on the calendar. They're creating opportunities every single day. Appreciate you guys for watching this video. If you're looking for more information on how to get started in the industry, you can click the first link down below, guys, and get placed in your first offer. Start making 5 to 15K a month as a closer, as a setter. Appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.
We're here in Switzerland.